What if I told you you can shape all the EVA foam that you have without a Dremel tool and make it more accurate using sanding sticks, some mesh sanding paper, and a special file? Stay tuned, I'm going to show you how. Here's the deal, is using a Dremel for shaping things can be really effective, but it's very fast, it's very aggressive, and yes, there's 8 million people out there going to say use dull stone tools, use the sanding drum, use this, use that. This works for me, so let's just go with that, okay? One thing to keep in mind too is that the Dremel kicks up a lot of that EVA dust, and you wear a mask, and I've come out of the shop just covered in this stuff, and it's gross. And it can't be healthy. When you use stuff like this, yes, it creates the dust, but the dust is a lot more contained. It's not being whipped out into space by your Dremel tool. So it works really well. This is how you can shape the EVA foam for your armor and your cosplay reasonably inexpensively, without a power tool, without the noise, with less dust being kicked up. There's still dust, but it's not being kicked up. And I really like this. I question whether it's actually faster or slower than the Dremel in the first place. So here's the skinny, is you can get a Dremel and you can come in and you can start carving lines and trying to get these edges done, but you almost never can get them level. Like here, I'll give you an example, and of course I'm going to exaggerate this, but all of you will understand. So you're going to try to make a nice groove, come along here, and something scares you and you go, ah. And so you screwed up that one little bit and trying to get like a nice groove. With the Dremel, it's fast. With the Dremel, it's fast. But what comes with it is usually an edge that's not that great. So we needed some bleeder lines in, some weapons. And these aren't the best in the world, but this is the first try that I've ever done this. And there was a trick that was a hand tool that didn't spit up as much of this EVA foam dust that worked really well. And it came out to, I had a Kutzall file. Now this is nothing more than a carbide file, but here's where it gets kind of interesting, is that it actually attacks the foam fairly well. So you want like a nice bleeder line. Give it a little bit of pressure, and you can hand carve out an almost perfect line. And you want a little taper to that, so come in sideways, right, and clean it up. So you can start shaping foam with these Kutzall files. Granted, they leave a kind of a bad texture behind. Now, this is where I ran into something else. Going through the hardware store, and this is carbide. Well, you can also get drywall sandpaper stuff called, this is craft sandpaper, but it's sand screen. It's carbide. So get a heavy grit carbide screen, and I just glued it to this, and it's a finer coarse grit, and you can get in there and start smoothing it out. And you can start doing this, like, come on, check that out. Like, can you make a groove that fast, even with a Dremel? You saw how long it took me to do that. To make a nice groove that fast with one of these things? Like, that's awesome. So, it also got me thinking, what about making that beveled edge, the tapered edge along here, the sharp point? You've got like a fairly long edge here, and yes, you can have a belt sander or an Orbital sander or whatever sander, I don't care. Basically what it boils down to is that you need to get a sander, and some people don't have sanders or the money for a sander. So let's just see what we can do here on this edge. And I just touched it earlier, you can see it's a little rough, but here you go. You can see that it's pretty standard. Let's see what happens when we do this. Granted, it's a little more work than using a Dremel tool, but infinitely more accurate. Okay, so we've got, you know, the first part of that bevel in there. I'm gonna just take this down quite a ways. One thing is that I'm not wearing a respirator here. I don't really need to, because all of this dust is just going down and kind of, it's just falling down where I want it to be anyway. So let's come in here with a finer grit. Some of this carbide sanding mesh and these Kutzall tools work incredibly well in foam. Oh, and there's that taper. You can see taper is really quick. Got it in there. It's nice and smooth. So hoping that this is focusing here. But it gives you an idea of what it can do.